Welcome to Evening Whispers of Love. This story brings us Hazel, a young woman engaged to a man she doesn't love. When an accident befalls her aunt, Hazel must move across the country to help, but what will she find in Oregon? Sit back, relax, and let's listen to Hazel's story. Chapter 1. The Letter That Changed Everything. The Parker farmhouse sat square and sun-bleached on the Kansas prairie, its windows rattling in the early May wind. Hazel Parker stood at the kitchen table, arms crossed, foot tapping, watching her mother read the letter for the third time. Pearl Parker's brow pinched tighter with every line. "Well," Hazel demanded, her voice carrying the way it always did. "Is Aunt Meg all right or not?" Pearl exhaled sharply. "She's alive, Hazel. But she's gone and broken her leg clean through. Lester," she turned to her husband, who was pretending to read the newspaper, "your sister needs help." Lester lowered the paper an inch. "Meg always was stubborn. Probably tried to climb something she shouldn't." Hazel snorted. "She lives next to a waterfall, Dad. Everything there is something she shouldn't climb." Pearl shot her a look, but Hazel only lifted her chin. She'd never been the quiet type, and no one in the Parker family expected her to start now. Across the room, Robert Whitfield leaned back in his chair, boots crossed, grinning like he owned the place. "Well now," he boomed. "Sounds like Meg needs a strong hand. I could go help." Pearl smiled politely. Hazel rolled her eyes, so hard she nearly saw the back of her skull. Robert was 22, 2 years older than Ruth, and had been underfoot her entire life. Loud, cheerful, and convinced he was charming, he had a way of filling every room with his voice. He wasn't a bad man, not at all, but he was a lot. And everyone in town had always assumed he and Hazel would marry someday. Everyone except Hazel. She didn't dislike him. She just didn't love him. Not the way he loved her. Not the way a person should love the one they planned to spend forever with. Pearl folded the letter carefully. "Meg says she'll need someone for at least the summer. Maybe longer." Robert perked up. "Well, Hazel won't be going anywhere. Not with the wedding coming up." Hazel stiffened. "The wedding is in September, Robert. And only because you and my parents decided that was convenient." Pearl sighed. "Hazel, don't start." "I'm not starting," Hazel said, hands on her hips. "I'm just saying I haven't agreed to anything except that I'd think about it." Robert laughed, loud and oblivious. "You've been thinking about it for years." Hazel shot him a glare sharp enough to cut rope. Lester cleared his throat. "Pearl and I have talked it over. Meg needs help, and Hazel is the one who can go." Hazel blinked. "Me?" Pearl nodded. "You're young, you're strong, and you're not tied down yet." Robert sputtered. "Not tied down. She's practically." "I'll go," Hazel replied almost too quickly. Pearl pressed on. "You'll go to Oregon for the summer. Help Meg until she's back on her feet. Then you'll come home in September, and we'll have the wedding." Hazel's stomach dropped. "I mean, nothing is set in stone. We're your parents," Lester said gently. "We're doing what's best." "For who?" Hazel muttered. Robert stood and clapped her on the shoulder, nearly knocking her forward. "It'll be good for you, Hayes. Get some fresh air. Clear your head. And when you come back, we'll finally settle down." She jerked away from his hand. "Don't call me Hayes." He laughed again, not hearing a thing. Hazel looked out the window toward the endless stretch of prairie. Kansas had always felt too small for her, too predictable, too decided. And now, somehow, her parents had decided her future without asking her at all. But Oregon was far. Wild. Unknown. Maybe, she thought, that was exactly what she needed. Pearl touched her arm. "You'll leave next week." Hazel swallowed. "All right." Robert beamed. "Write me every day." Hazel forced a smile. He laughed and walked out the door. Hazel felt empty, but excited for something new. And as the wind rattled the windows and the prairie stretched endlessly beyond them, Hazel kept thinking the word over and over: Oregon. Chapter 2. The Road to Oregon. The train rocked steadily beneath Hazel Parker's feet as it cut through the endless green of the Pacific Northwest. Kansas had been flat and familiar. Oregon rose around her in towering pines and mist-soaked cliffs that made her press her forehead to the window like a child. Every mile carried her farther from Robert's booming voice, her mother's expectations, and the wedding she hadn't agreed to but somehow was already scheduled for September. By the time the train hissed into the small station near Multnomah Falls, Hazel's heart was thudding with a strange mix of nerves and relief. A man in worn overalls and a sun-bleached hat lifted a hand. "You Hazel Parker?" His voice was gravelly but kind. "Yes, sir," Hazel said, adjusting her suitcase. "You must be Ralph. My mother said you would be waiting for me." "That's me." He took her bag as though it weighed nothing. "Meg's been frettin' all morning. Told her you'd get here just fine, but you know your aunt." Hazel smiled. "I do." Ralph's truck was old, loud, and smelled faintly of hay, but the ride wound through scenery so breathtaking Ruth barely noticed the bumps. Waterfalls spilled down mossy cliffs. Ferns grew taller than she'd ever seen. The air tasted like rain and pine needles. "Not Kansas, is it?" Ralph chuckled. "Not even close," Hazel murmured, staring out the window. And that's the best part. When they pulled into Aunt Meg's farm, a small, tidy dairy operation tucked against the forest, Ruth felt her shoulders loosen. It wasn't grand or sprawling like she'd imagined. It was quaint, lived in, and welcoming in a way Kansas never quite managed. Aunt Meg hobbled out onto the porch, leaning heavily on a crutch. Her gray hair was pinned up in a messy bun, and her smile was wide enough to warm the whole valley. "Hazel," she called. Hazel rushed forward. "Aunt Meg, you should be resting." "Oh, hush," Meg said, pulling her into a one-armed hug. "Let me look at you. You're taller. And louder, I bet." "Always," Hazel said, grinning. Meg laughed. "Good. I need loud around here. Ralph's too quiet." "Hey now," Ralph muttered, but he was smiling. Meg pointed toward a small cottage tucked behind the barn. "That's where you'll be staying. It's nothing fancy, but it's yours." Hazel's chest warmed. "It's perfect." Inside the main house, Meg eased herself into a chair with a sigh. "I'm afraid I haven't been able to cook much. Everything takes twice as long on one leg." "I'll make dinner tonight," Hazel said immediately. Meg's relief was instant and unhidden. "Bless you, child." Hazel rolled up her sleeves, already feeling more useful than she had in months. The kitchen was small but cozy, with a window overlooking the pasture and a stack of recipe cards Meg had clearly abandoned after her injury. As she chopped onions, Ralph leaned against the doorway. "My nephew'll be by soon. Works at the store in town. He's bringin' flour." Hazel nodded, unfazed as she prepared the turnips. "Name's Liam. Good kid. Quiet. Real quiet." Hazel smirked. "Quieter than you?" Ralph snorted. "Much." A few minutes later, the sound of boots on the porch made Hazel glance up. Ralph stepped outside to greet whoever it was. Then a tall figure appeared in the doorway. He was broad-shouldered, sun-tanned, and blond in a way that caught the light. His eyes, blue, steady, unreadable, met hers for a single heartbeat before he looked away, almost shyly. He held a sack of flour in one hand like it weighed nothing. "Hazel," Ralph said. "This here's my nephew, Liam Coulson." Liam nodded once. "Ma'am." His voice was low, quiet, and somehow more arresting than Robert's loudest laugh. Hazel wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly aware of the flour smudged on her cheek. "Nice to meet you, Liam." He glanced at her again, quick, almost startled, before setting the flour on the counter. "Uncle Ralph said you needed this," he murmured. "Thank you," Hazel said, trying to sound casual, normal, not like her heart had just tripped over itself. Liam nodded again, then stepped back as though unsure what to do with himself. Hazel turned back to her chopping, pretending she wasn't watching him from the corner of her eye. Pretending she wasn't suddenly, inexplicably flustered. Pretending she wasn't smitten. Because she absolutely was. And she absolutely did not want anyone, not Ralph, not Aunt Meg, and certainly not Liam, to know it. Chapter 3. The Weight of 6 Acres. Hazel Parker had never worked so hard in her life. Kansas chores were one thing, helping her mother with laundry, feeding chickens, sweeping the porch. But Aunt Meg's 6 acres in Oregon were a different creature entirely. The land was lush and stubborn, full of blackberry brambles that snagged her skirt, fences that always needed mending, and a dairy cow who seemed personally offended by Hazel's attempts to milk her. By the time the sun dipped behind the pines, Hazel's arms ached, her back throbbed, and she was fairly certain she had dirt in places dirt should never be. But she felt good, tired in a way that meant something. She washed up and joined Aunt Meg on the porch, where the older woman sat with her leg propped on a stool, sipping tea. The evening air was cool and smelled faintly of cedar. Fireflies blinked lazily in the tall grass. Hazel sank into the chair beside her with a groan. "I think your land is trying to kill me." Meg chuckled. "If it wanted you dead, it'd have done it by noon." Hazel laughed, then fell quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, more like something pressing on her chest. Meg noticed immediately. "All right," she said softly. "Out with it." Hazel stared at her hands. I don't love Robert." Meg didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't scold. She simply waited. Hazel swallowed. "I'm only marrying him because it's what my parents want. They think it's easier, expected. And I've known him forever, so it's like they think that's enough." Meg let out a long, weary sigh. "Oh, Hazel." Hazel blinked hard. "I know it sounds foolish. People marry for all sorts of reasons. But I don't feel anything for him. Not the way he feels for me. And I don't want to hurt him, but I don't want to live a life that isn't mine." Meg reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then don't." Hazel looked up, startled. Meg's voice was gentle but firm. "You get one life, one heart. And if you give it away to someone you don't love, you'll spend the rest of your days wondering what might have been." Hazel hesitated. "Did you ever wonder? About your life? About coming here?" Meg's eyes softened, drifting toward the darkening tree-line. "I came to Oregon for Stan. Met him when I was 26. He was quiet, steady, and kind. Not much to look at, but he had a way of making me feel seen." Hazel listened, breath held. "I loved him," Meg said simply. "So I packed up my life and followed him here. Married him under a cedar tree. And 5 years later, he was gone." Hazel's heart twisted. "I never knew." Meg nodded. "Most people don't. It's not a story I tell often. Did you ever remarry?" Hazel asked softly. Meg didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the open garage, where the faint clink of tools echoed. Ralph was in there, sleeves rolled up, fixing something Hazel couldn't see. He worked with quiet focus, humming under his breath. Meg's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, I never did." Hazel followed her gaze. "But?" Meg smiled, small and wistful. "Life has a way of surprising you, Hazel. Even after heartbreak. Even after you think you've had your share of love." Hazel felt warmth bloom in her chest. "You care for him." Meg didn't deny it. "He's been here every day since I broke this leg. Won't let me lift a thing. Stubborn as a mule, that man." Hazel smiled. "Sounds like someone else I know." Meg nudged her gently. "You deserve a love that feels like choice, not obligation. Don't settle for anything less." Hazel looked out over the fields, where the last light of day brushed the grass in gold. Somewhere in the distance, a truck engine rumbled. Liam's, she guessed, and her heart gave a small, traitorous flutter. Chapter 4. The One Who Didn't Come to Supper. The lake behind Aunt Meg's property was the kind of place Hazel had only ever seen in picture books. Clear water, ringed with pines, sunlight flickering across the surface like scattered coins. After a long morning of chores, she slipped into the cool water with a sigh that came from her bones. Floating on her back, she let the quiet settle over her. No Robert, no wedding talk, no expectations. Just the soft lap of water and the distant call of a bird. Then footsteps. Hazel jerked upright, sending ripples across the lake. On the far bank, half hidden by reeds, stood Liam Coulson with a fishing pole in hand. He hadn't seen her yet. He was focused still, the picture of someone who preferred the company of water and trees to people. Hazel grinned. She swam toward him, pushing through the water with easy strokes. When she got close enough, she called, "You always sneak up on women swimming alone, or is today special?" Liam startled so hard he nearly dropped his pole. "Oh, sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." Hazel laughed. "Clearly." He shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. I fish here sometimes." "I can see that." She treaded water a few feet from shore. "Catch anything?" "Not yet." He hesitated, then added, "But it's not really about catching. I just like being out here." His voice softened when he talked about it, barely noticeable, but Hazel caught it. She liked the way he looked at the lake, like it was something sacred. "You really love it," she said. He nodded. "Fishing's quiet. Predictable. Makes sense to me." Hazel smiled. "I'm not very quiet." A tiny smile tugged at his mouth. "I noticed." She splashed a little water in his direction, just enough to make him blink. "Well, since you're here, you might as well come to dinner tonight. Aunt Meg would love to have you." Liam froze. "Dinner?" "Yes. You know, food, conversation, plates. It's a whole thing." He looked like she'd asked him to recite poetry in front of a crowd. I don't know. I've got chores. And Uncle Ralph." 5 o'clock, she said, cutting him off with a bright grin. "I'll see you then." He opened his mouth, probably to protest, but Hazel was already swimming away, laughing as she went. By the time she reached the house, she was breathless with excitement. "Aunt Meg," she called, bursting into the kitchen. "Guess who I ran into at the lake?" Meg raised an eyebrow. "If it was a bear, I'm not surprised. They like that spot." "Liam," Hazel said, ignoring the joke. "And I invited him to supper." Meg's smile was slow and knowing. "Did you now?" Hazel felt her cheeks warm. "He's nice." "He is," Meg agreed. "Quiet but good-hearted." Hazel tried not to look too pleased as she set to work preparing dinner. Roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread. She kept glancing at the clock, smoothing her hair, checking the window. 5 o'clock came. Then 5:15. Then 5:30. Hazel's stomach tightened. By 6, the food was cooling on the table, and Hazel was staring at the empty chair like it had personally offended her. Meg reached over and patted her hand. "Sweetheart, something must have come up. Ralph probably needed him for something." Hazel swallowed hard. He could have sent word. Meg's voice was gentle. "Men like Liam, sometimes they get nervous. Or unsure. Doesn't mean he meant to hurt you." Hazel nodded, but her throat felt tight. She'd invited him. He'd said yes. She'd let herself hope. And he hadn't come. She pushed her food around her plate, appetite gone. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, and the lake shimmered in the distance, quiet, still, holding the memory of a moment she wasn't sure meant anything at all. But she couldn't shake the sting, or the question echoing in her chest. Why didn't he come? Chapter 5. The One Who Came Too Late. Hazel woke the next morning determined, absolutely determined, not to care. She fed the chickens with unnecessary vigor. She hauled water with more force than necessary. She scrubbed the porch railings until Aunt Meg finally called out, "Hazel, sweetheart, if you scrub any harder you'll sand the paint clean off." Hazel set the brush down, cheeks flushed. "Just keeping busy." Meg gave her a look that said she wasn't fooled for a second. Hazel didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to admit how long she'd sat at the dinner table waiting, how every crunch of gravel outside had made her heart jump, how she'd finally gone to bed feeling foolish and small. She'd invited him. He'd said yes. And then he hadn't come. Fine. She didn't care. Not even a little. She cared a lot. By mid-morning, she was in the garden pulling weeds with unnecessary ferocity when she heard the low rumble of a truck. She froze, dirt under her nails, hair falling out of its braid. Aunt Meg glanced toward the driveway. That'll be Ralph. Or Liam. Hazel's stomach flipped. I don't care which. Meg's smile was maddeningly gentle. Of course you don't. Hazel stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, trying to look like she hadn't been thinking about Liam Coulson since last night. Ralph's truck pulled up, but it wasn't Ralph who stepped out. Liam climbed down slowly, almost cautiously, like he wasn't sure he was welcome. His blonde hair was mussed, his shirt rumpled, and he held something in his hands, a small paper sack. Hazel crossed her arms. "Morning." He swallowed. "Morning." Meg, sensing the tension, excused herself with a suspiciously convenient, "I should go check on the bread," and disappeared inside. Hazel waited, chin lifted. Liam shifted his weight, eyes flicking everywhere except her face. I brought these," he said finally, holding out the paper sack. Hazel didn't take it. "What is it?" "Biscuits," he murmured. "From the store. I made them this morning." Hazel blinked. "You bake?" He shrugged. "Sometimes." She finally took the bag, but her expression didn't soften. "Thank you." She turned toward the house. Behind her, Liam made a small sound. Half inhale, half attempt at a word. "Hazel, I." But nothing else came out. He stood there, jaw working, hands useless at his sides. Hazel didn't turn around. "Have a good day, Liam." She walked inside, closing the screen door gently but firmly behind her. The kitchen felt too quiet, too still. She set the biscuits on the counter and pressed her palms against the cool wood, breathing slowly. Aunt Meg peeked in from the pantry, eyes soft with concern. "Everything all right?" Hazel forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. Just fine." But as she looked out the window and watched Liam's truck pull away, a heavy, sinking feeling settled in her chest. This summer was going to be long. And not great. Chapter 6. The Unwelcome Visitor. Hazel was elbow-deep in dishwater when Aunt Meg called from the porch. "Hazel? Letter for you." Hazel dried her hands on her apron and stepped outside. Meg held out an envelope with her mother's tidy handwriting across the front. Hazel's stomach sank before she even opened it. She read the letter once, then again slower. Robert is coming to visit for a few days. He'll arrive by train on Thursday. It will be good for you two to spend time together. Hazel let her arm fall limp at her side. Oh, perfect. Meg raised an eyebrow. Bad news. Hazel sank onto the porch step. Robert's coming. Meg winced. Ah, I don't want him here, Hazel said, voice tight. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to smile and act like I'm excited to see him. I don't want to talk about September or wedding colors or… She broke off, pressing her palms to her eyes. I just don't want him here. Meg eased herself into the rocking chair. Then don't pretend. Hazel let out a humorless laugh. That's easy for you to say. Meg rocked once, twice. Hazel, you're allowed to feel what you feel. Hazel hesitated, then blurted. I feel something for Liam. Meg stopped rocking. Hazel stared at her hands. I know it's ridiculous. I barely know him. He barely talks. But when I'm around him, I feel like I understand him. Like I've known him longer than I have. And I know that's foolish, and I know I shouldn't feel anything at all. But… Meg's expression shifted, something between alarm and amusement. Hazel frowned. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Meg didn't answer. Instead, she slowly turned her head toward the yard. Hazel followed her gaze. Liam Coulson stood at the bottom of the porch steps, a brown paper sack of apples in his hands, his face pale as moonlight. Hazel's heart stopped. He had heard. He had heard everything. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then Liam cleared his throat, barely. Uncle Ralph told me to drop these off. He set the apples on the porch rail, nodding stiffly to Meg, then to Hazel, though he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Hazel opened her mouth. She had no idea what she meant to say, but Liam was already backing away. I should go, he murmured. And then he did, turning, climbing into his truck, and driving off so fast gravel spit behind the tires. Hazel stared after him, mortified down to her bones. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Meg burst out laughing. Hazel whipped around. Meg, this is not funny. Meg wiped tears from her eyes. Oh, sweetheart. Life has a strange way of working itself out. Hazel groaned, burying her face in her hands. I can never look at him again. Meg chuckled. Oh, you will. And he'll look back. Trust me. Hazel didn't trust anything at that moment. Not her feelings, not her luck, and certainly not the universe's sense of humor. Robert was coming. Liam had overheard her confession. And the summer suddenly felt even more complicated than before. Chapter 7. The Visitor from Kansas. Robert Whitfield arrived exactly as Hazel expected. Loud, confident, and taking up far more space than the tiny Oregon train platform had to offer. Hazel, he boomed the moment he spotted her. There's my girl. Hazel forced a smile as he swept her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. She stiffened, patting his back awkwardly. Hi, Robert. Welcome to Oregon. He set her down and looked around with theatrical disappointment. Not much to look at, is it? Trees, trees, and more trees. Hazel blinked. That's kind of the point. Robert laughed like she'd made a joke. Well, I'm here now. Things'll be more exciting. Hazel doubted that very much. The drive back to Aunt Meg's was long enough for Robert to talk nonstop. About his job, his mother, the wedding he kept referring to as if it were a done deal. Hazel stared out the window, wishing she could melt into the forest. When they pulled into the driveway, Aunt Meg was waiting on the porch, cane in hand. Robert, she greeted warmly. Good to see you. Mrs. Parker, he said, kissing her cheek. You look lovely as ever. Meg shot Hazel a look that said good luck, then ushered them inside. Hazel had barely set Robert's suitcase down when the familiar rumble of Ralph's truck drifted up the drive. Hazel's heart stuttered. Robert peered out the window. Who's that? Ralph, Hazel said quickly. Aunt Meg's farmhand. The truck door slammed. Hazel's breath caught. Liam. He stepped out carrying 2 glass bottles of milk, his blonde hair catching the afternoon light. He looked tired, focused, unaware of the storm he was walking into. Robert followed Hazel outside before she could stop him. Well now, Robert said, striding forward with his hand out. I'm Robert Whitfield, Hazel's fiancé. Hazel nearly choked. Robert. Liam froze mid-step. His eyes flicked to Hazel, then to Robert's outstretched hand. He hesitated, then shook it politely. Liam Coulson, he said quietly. Robert clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to make Liam flinch. Good to meet you, son. You work for Ralph. Liam nodded. Yes, sir. Just dropping off milk. Hazel stepped forward, trying to steady her voice. Thank you, Liam. Aunt Meg appreciates it. Liam handed her the bottles, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. Hazel felt it like a spark. Robert didn't notice. So, Liam, you from around here? Yes, Liam said, eyes fixed on the ground. Quiet one, aren't you? Robert laughed. Hazel's jaw tightened. Robert. But Liam only nodded, the faintest flush rising in his cheeks. He stepped back toward the truck. I should get going. Hazel opened her mouth. She didn't know what she meant to say, only that she didn't want him to leave like this. But Liam didn't give her the chance. He nodded once to her, once to Robert, then climbed into the truck and drove off. Robert watched him go. Strange fellow. Hazel hugged the milk bottles to her chest. He's not strange. He's just quiet. Robert shrugged. Well, he's no competition, that's for sure. Hazel's stomach twisted. Aunt Meg appeared in the doorway, eyes sharp with understanding. Come inside, you two. Supper's almost ready. Hazel followed, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily on her shoulders. Robert was here. Liam had seen him. And Hazel suddenly felt trapped between two worlds. One she'd been pushed toward her whole life, and one she'd barely begun to imagine. The summer had just become far more complicated. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. Robert was late. Again. Hazel sat on the small porch of her little outback house, arms wrapped around herself as the sky dimmed from gold to blue. She could hear Aunt Meg and Ralph talking softly in the main house, the clink of dishes, the hum of the evening settling in. Then, heavy footsteps. Loud, hurried, unmistakably Robert. There you are, he said, breathless as he strode up. Sorry I'm late. Town's got nothing going on, I swear. Nearly died of boredom. Hazel forced a thin smile. It's fine. It's not fine, he said, stepping closer. I came all this way to see you, Hazel. We barely get any time alone. Before she could respond, he leaned in and kissed her, hard, insistent, familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. She let him for a moment, out of habit more than desire, but the longer it went on, the more wrong it felt. She pulled back abruptly. Robert blinked. What's the matter? Hazel stepped away, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. I don't want to do this. He frowned. Hazel, we've kissed before. I know. And we're practically married, he added, reaching for her again. We can do more than this. No one would blame us. Hazel's breath caught, anger, fear, frustration all rising at once. Robert, stop. He froze, confused. What? What's wrong with you lately? Hazel's voice cracked. I don't love you. Silence. Robert stared at her as if she'd slapped him. What did you just say? Hazel swallowed hard, but the words came out stronger this time. I don't love you. I never have. And I don't want to marry you. His face darkened, disbelief twisting into anger. Hazel, don't be ridiculous. You're upset. You don't mean that. I do, she whispered. Robert stepped back, jaw clenched. You should rethink what you just said. I'm not going to. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Fine. Have it your way. He turned on his heel and stormed down the path, gravel crunching under his boots. Hazel watched him disappear into the dark, heading toward the truck he'd borrowed from the hotel in town. When the sound of the engine faded, the night felt too big, too quiet. Hazel walked blindly toward the lake, her feet knowing the path even when her mind didn't. She reached the water's edge and sank to her knees, the cool earth grounding her as the first sob tore free. She cried, quiet at first, then harder, shoulders shaking, breath hitching. Everything she'd been holding in for months spilled out. The pressure, the expectations, the guilt, the fear, the strange, impossible feelings for a man who barely spoke. She pressed her hands to her face, tears dripping into the lake. She didn't hear the soft crunch of leaves behind her. Didn't see the tall, familiar figure standing half-hidden among the trees. Liam Coulson had come down to the lake to clear his head after a long day. He hadn't expected to find Hazel there, kneeling in the moonlight, crying like her heart had broken clean in two. He froze, breath caught in his throat. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't dare intrude. But he saw her, every trembling breath, every tear, every piece of the truth she thought she was alone with. And something in him shifted, quietly, deeply, irrevocably. Hazel cried until she had nothing left, unaware of the man in the shadows who cared far more than he knew how to say. Chapter 9. What was said and what was heard. Hazel moved quietly around the kitchen, the kettle hissing softly on the stove. Aunt Meg sat in her wheelchair near the table, her broken leg propped on a cushion, flipping through a seed catalog she couldn't plant from yet. "You're awfully quiet this morning," Meg said without looking up. Hazel didn't answer. She poured the hot water over the tea leaves, watching the steam rise like a curtain she wished she could hide behind. A knock sounded at the back door. Hazel stiffened. "I'll get it." Meg nodded, settling back. Hazel opened the door and froze. Liam stood there, holding a small crate of eggs and a paper sack. His blonde hair was damp from the morning, his shirt sleeves rolled, his expression unreadable but tense. "Morning," he said softly. Hazel swallowed. "Morning." He handed her the crate. She took it automatically, her fingers brushing his. He didn't move, didn't leave, just stood there, breathing like he was gathering courage. Then he said it. "I saw you last night." Hazel's breath caught. "What?" "At the lake." His voice was low, steady, but there was something trembling underneath. "You were crying." "I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to watch. I just didn't want to interrupt." Hazel stared at him, stunned into silence. Liam looked down, then back up, meeting her eyes with a bravery she'd never seen from him before. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. "The most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Hazel's heart slammed against her ribs. He kept going, words tumbling out like he'd held them in too long. "I wanted to come to dinner that night. I walked all the way here. I stood outside the window and saw you laughing with your aunt. You were shining. And I thought," he swallowed hard, "I thought I could never please you, that you'd see right through me, that I wasn't enough." Hazel's lips parted, but no sound came out. She had never expected this from him. Not the confession, not the honesty, not the raw, trembling truth of it. Liam looked at her like he was waiting for her to breathe. But before she could, "Hazel!" Robert's voice cut through the air like a blade. He strode up the path, boots crunching, face set in irritation. He didn't hear a word Liam had said, but he saw him standing close to Hazel and immediately bristled. "Move," Robert snapped, pushing past Liam with a shoulder. Liam stepped back, jaw tightening, but he didn't say a word. Hazel's heart lurched. "Robert, we need to talk," he said sharply. Hazel turned to Liam, wanting, needing, to say something, anything. But Liam was already stepping away, eyes lowered, retreating like a wounded animal. He murmured, "Have a good day, Hazel," and walked off quickly, almost too quickly, disappearing around the barn. Hazel felt the loss like a physical ache. Robert didn't notice. "Hazel, now." She closed her eyes, steadying herself, then nodded stiffly. "Fine." They walked to her little outback house. Hazel shut the door behind them, arms crossed. Robert didn't sit. He paced once, then turned to her with a self-satisfied sigh. "I thought about what you said," he began, as though delivering a sermon. "And since I'm leaving later today, I want you to know. I forgive you." Hazel blinked. "You what?" "For your outburst," he clarified. "You were emotional. Confused. I get it. And I'm willing to put it behind us, so we can move forward with the wedding." Hazel stared at him, disbelief turning slowly into anger. "No." Robert frowned. "No what?" "No, I will not marry you." He laughed, actually laughed. "Hazel, don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous," she snapped. "I don't love you. I don't want to marry you. And I'm not going to." Robert's smile faltered. "Hazel, think about what you're saying." "I have," she said firmly. "And my answer is no." His face twisted, confusion, then insult, then anger. "Fine," he spat. "Forget it." He grabbed his hat, stormed out, and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. Hazel stood alone in the quiet house, her breath trembling. Outside, she could hear the distant rumble of a truck, Liam's, she guessed, pulling away from the farm. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling everything at once. Relief, fear, embarrassment, and the echo of Liam's voice. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Hazel sank onto the edge of her bed, overwhelmed. Chapter 10. Under the Willow. Hazel couldn't sit still. All day, her thoughts had circled the same point. Liam's confession at the door, the way his voice had trembled, the way he'd looked at her like she was something he didn't dare reach for. And then Robert barging in, shattering the moment before she could even breathe. But now Robert was gone, and Hazel knew exactly where Liam would be. As the sun dipped behind the pines, she slipped out of the house and followed the narrow path toward the lake. The air was warm, humming with crickets, the sky streaked in rose and violet. Her heart pounded harder with every step. When she reached the clearing, she saw him. Liam stood at the water's edge, hands in his pockets, staring out across the lake as though trying to think himself into calm. The fading light brushed gold across his hair. Hazel didn't hesitate. "Liam!" He turned, surprised, breath-catching. And before he could say a word, Hazel ran to him, grabbed his shirt, and kissed him. It was fierce, breathless, full of everything she hadn't said. Liam froze for half a heartbeat, then gently pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. "Hazel," he whispered, voice unsteady. "What about your fiancé?" She shook her head, gripping his shirt tighter. "I'm not marrying him. I was never going to marry him. I don't love him." Liam searched her face, eyes dark with something she couldn't name. "Then who do you?" "I love someone else," she breathed. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. Something in Liam broke open. He cupped her face with both hands and kissed her again. This time with a force Hazel had never imagined from him, all the quiet intensity he carried finally unleashed. The world fell away, the lake, the trees, the sky. There was only him, only them, only the feeling of finally choosing something for herself. They sank together beneath the sweeping branches of the old willow tree, the night warm around them, the lake whispering against the shore. Hazel felt safe, wanted, understood in a way she had never known. Time blurred. When the world settled again, they lay side by side in the soft grass, Hazel's head resting against Liam's shoulder, the willow leaves swaying gently above them like a curtain. Liam turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His voice was quiet but sure. "I love you, Hazel." Her breath caught. She had never heard those words sound so true. Hazel laced her fingers with his, the night wrapping around them like a promise. "I love you too." Chapter 11. The Letter and the Morning After. Hazel woke before dawn, the sky still a soft gray blue, the world quiet except for the distant rush of the falls. Her body felt warm and heavy from the night before, her heart full in a way she'd never known. She lay beneath the willow tree for a long moment, listening to the soft breathing beside her. Liam was still asleep, one arm tucked behind his head, the other resting lightly against her waist as though he'd fallen asleep mid-reach. Hazel watched him, her chest tightening with something fierce and tender. She touched his hand gently. "Liam," she whispered. His eyes opened slowly, blue and soft with sleep. When he saw her, he smiled, small, shy, but real. "Morning," he murmured. Hazel felt her cheeks warm. "Morning." They stayed like that for a moment, the world quiet around them, the willow branches swaying overhead. Then Liam shifted, propping himself up on an elbow. "Are you all right?" he asked. Hazel nodded. "More than all right." He brushed a thumb across her cheek, hesitant but sure. "Good." They walked back to the farm together, fingers brushing but not quite holding, both of them shy in the daylight after the intensity of the night before. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Liam paused. "I should get to work," he said softly. Hazel nodded, though she didn't want him to go. "I'll see you later?" His smile deepened. "You will." He headed toward the barn, and Hazel watched him until he disappeared inside. The letter. Inside the kitchen, Aunt Meg sat in her wheelchair, sipping tea and pretending not to stare at Hazel's glowing face. "Well," Meg said, "you look like someone who finally slept." Hazel blushed. "Something like that." Meg chuckled. "Sit down, sweetheart. You've got something on your mind." Hazel did. She sat at the table, pulled a sheet of paper toward her, and took a deep breath. "I'm writing to my parents," she said. Meg raised an eyebrow. "And what are you telling them?" Hazel dipped her pen in ink, her hand steady. "That I'm not coming home." Meg's eyes softened. "Good girl." Hazel began to write. "Dear Mama and Daddy, I hope this letter finds you well. I know you expect me home in September, but I need to tell you the truth. I'm not returning to Kansas. Not now. Maybe not ever. I can't marry Robert. I never could. I don't love him, and it isn't fair to pretend anymore. I know this will disappoint you, but I have to choose my own life. I found something here, something good, something honest. I feel more myself in Oregon than I ever did back home. I'm helping Aunt Meg, and I'm learning who I am. I'm staying. Please try to understand. With love, Hazel." She folded the letter carefully, sealing it before she could second-guess herself. Meg watched her with quiet pride. "You did the right thing." Hazel exhaled. "I hope so." Meg reached out and squeezed her hand. "Hazel, choosing your own life is always the right thing." Hazel looked out the window toward the barn, where she knew Liam was working and felt her heart lift. For the first time, her future didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a beginning. Chapter 12. Two Proposals Waiting in the Wings. Hazel spent the morning floating through her chores like someone walking inside a dream. Every time she paused, hanging laundry, feeding the chickens, sweeping the porch, her mind drifted back to the willow tree, to Liam's hands, his voice, the way he'd said "I love you" like it was the simplest truth in the world. By noon, she was useless. Aunt Meg noticed immediately. "You're glowing like a lantern," Meg said from her wheelchair, sipping her tea. "Either you're in love or you've got a fever." Hazel blushed so hard she nearly dropped the broom. Before she could respond, footsteps crunched on the path. Hazel turned, and there was Liam, walking toward the porch with a purpose she'd never seen in him before. His jaw was set, his eyes steady, his whole posture brimming with quiet determination. Hazel's heart leapt. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. "Hazel," he said, voice low but sure. "I need to ask you something." Aunt Meg's eyebrows shot up. "Well, don't mind me," she muttered, wheeling herself conveniently toward the kitchen doorway, but not actually leaving. Hazel stepped down one stair, then another, until she was standing right in front of him. Liam took her hands. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you longer than I knew what to do with. And I don't want to waste another day wishing I'd said something sooner." Hazel's breath caught. Liam swallowed, gathering courage. "Will you marry me?" Hazel didn't hesitate. Not for a heartbeat. "Yes." Liam exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground in a rare burst of emotion. Hazel laughed, burying her face in his shoulder, feeling more certain than she'd ever felt in her life. Aunt Meg clapped once loudly. "About time." Hazel and Liam broke apart, both blushing. Meg wheeled forward, beaming. "You two can stay in the Outback house until you find your own place. It's small, but it'll do just fine for newlyweds." Hazel's eyes filled with grateful tears. "Meg, don't thank me," Meg said. "Just be happy. That's all I want." Liam squeezed Hazel's hand, then cleared his throat. "I should tell Uncle Ralph." Hazel nodded, watching him head toward the barn with a lightness in his step she'd never seen before. Ralph's reaction. Ralph was elbow-deep in engine parts when Liam walked in. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "You look like a man who's either seen heaven or trouble," Ralph said. "Which is it?" Liam took a breath. "I asked Hazel to marry me." Ralph froze, then broke into a wide grin. "Well, I'll be damned. Congratulations, boy." He clapped Liam on the back, so hard Liam nearly stumbled. "Hazel's a good one," Ralph said warmly. "You take care of her." "I will," Liam said, and he meant it with every part of himself. Ralph nodded, thoughtful. "You know, seeing you do that makes me think maybe I ought to do something I should have done a long time ago." Liam blinked. "What do you mean?" Ralph tossed the rag aside. "Meg, I've loved that woman for years. Figured she'd never want a stubborn old mule like me. But if you can find the courage to speak up, maybe I can too." Liam smiled, small, proud, hopeful. "You should." Ralph nodded, determination settling over him like a coat. "I think I will." Back at the house, Hazel stood on the porch, waiting for Liam to return. When she saw him walking back from the barn, she felt her heart swell all over again. He came straight to her, took her hands, and pressed his forehead to hers. "We're really doing this," Hazel whispered. "We are," Liam murmured. And as the afternoon sun warmed the fields and Aunt Meg hummed in the kitchen, Hazel felt her life settling into place. Unexpected, wild, and exactly right. Chapter 13. A Double Beginning. Hazel woke with a certainty she'd never felt before. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't fear. It was clarity, clean and bright as the Oregon morning. She found Liam already outside, leaning against the porch rail of the Outback house, watching the mist lift off the fields. He turned when he heard her steps, and the smile he gave her was soft, sure, and full of everything they'd already promised each other. "Hazel," he said quietly, "I've been thinking." She stepped beside him. "So have I." He took her hand, thumb brushing her knuckles. "I don't want to wait. Not months. Not weeks. I want to marry you now. Today, if you'll have me." Hazel didn't even blink. "I want that too." Liam let out a breath that sounded like relief and joy tangled together. "Courthouse." "Courthouse," she said, grinning. They walked hand in hand to the main house, Hazel's heart fluttering with excitement. Aunt Meg was in the kitchen, rolling herself back from the stove in her wheelchair, the smell of cinnamon and butter filling the air. "Aunt Meg," Hazel said, barely containing herself. "We have news." Meg looked up, eyes twinkling. "Let me guess. You two are getting married before supper." Hazel laughed. "Close. We're going to the courthouse today." Meg clapped her hands together. "Well, it's about time. And you'll never believe this. Ralph came in earlier and proposed to me." Hazel gasped. "Meg, that's wonderful." Meg's cheeks flushed with a girlish pink. "I told him yes, of course. Took him long enough." Liam chuckled. "Uncle Ralph said he was thinking about it." Meg waved a hand. "Thinking, my foot. That man's been in love with me for years." The kitchen filled with laughter, warm, bright, overflowing. Hazel leaned into Liam, feeling the moment settle around them like a blessing. Two proposals in one morning. Two futures unfolding at once. It felt like the whole house was humming with new beginnings. Meg wheeled closer and took Hazel's hands. "You two can stay in the Outback house as long as you need. It's a good place to start a life." Hazel squeezed her aunt's fingers. "Thank you. For everything." Meg smiled. "Just promise me you'll be happy." Hazel looked at Liam, who was watching her with that quiet, steady love she'd come to crave. "I already am," she said. Later that day. The courthouse was small, tucked between a post office and a bakery, but Hazel thought it was perfect. They signed the papers, exchanged simple vows, and walked out into the sunlight as husband and wife. No fuss, no crowd, just the two of them and the promise they'd chosen freely. Liam kissed her on the courthouse steps, gentle and certain. "Mrs. Coulson," he murmured. Hazel felt her heart swell. "I like the sound of that." Back at the farm, Meg and Ralph were waiting on the porch, a makeshift celebration spread across the table. Fresh bread, apple butter, and a small bouquet of wildflowers Meg had insisted Ralph pick himself. Ralph lifted a jar of cider. "To the newlyweds," Meg added. "Both sets." They all laughed, the sound echoing across the fields. Hazel looked around, the farm, the pines, the lake glimmering in the distance, and felt something settle deep inside her. This was home. Not Kansas. Not the life her parents had planned. Not the future she'd been pushed toward. Here. With Liam. With Meg and Ralph. With the land that had changed her. Hazel slipped her hand into Liam's, and he squeezed gently, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. They would stay. They would build a life here. And it would be a good one, quiet, steady, full of love and work and mornings that smelled like pine and evenings that tasted like apple butter. A life they chose. That was the story of Hazel and Liam. Did you hope Hazel would marry Robert? I hear he went back to Kansas and became a shoe salesman and married a rough woman named Bertha. Thank you for listening to Evening Whispers of Love. Stay tuned for more.